I used to live in the countryside of Minas Gerais and I ended up moving to Rio de Janeiro since I had inherited a farm which, by the way, was wonderful, with lots of greenery and a very old house. But it was a big house with stained glass windows, stairs with a carved railing, 5 bedrooms, 2 large bathrooms, another smaller bathroom and a swimming pool that needed repairs, as some tiles were missing. Anyway, a very tempting house and with the advantage of being furnished with a lot of old furniture, and as my family was in a very comfortable situation and I could keep the farm, I decided not to sell it but to live in it. In fact, none of my family had lived in it because it was part of the payment of a debt passed many years ago and the house was kind of abandoned during all those years because nobody was interested in living in it. But when there was a division of assets due to the death of a relative, I received the farm as part of the inheritance. And as I was fascinated by the farm and passionate about Rio de Janeiro, there was no better opportunity than this one. I was all excited about my new home. I liked to do most of the things myself to get it how I wanted it. And after about 3 weeks, I was in the huge room and sitting in a rocking chair, making plans and looking at the colorful stained glass windows that must have been quite old, by the way. I was staring at one of these stained glass windows that were just at the end of the corridor, at the back of this huge room, when suddenly I saw a woman in a dark dress come out of the bathroom, cross the corridor and go to a room below. She didn't look around. She simply crossed the hall and entered the room. I stood there hypnotized and in disbelief. She was a very real woman to me. It couldn't be imagination, so much so that after the first fright, I turned on the other lights and walked slowly towards the room she entered, but all I saw was the antique furniture and a big, huge closet with a wonderful oval mirror, but there was no sign of the woman. He knew it wasn't an optical illusion. He was sure of what he had seen. About 3 days after the incident, I was tidying up the house, cleaning it during the night, and the light bulbs in the hallway along its entire length, they became dim and flickered a few times. They ended up going out and came back normally, so I continued to do my tidying, and from there 20 minutes or so, the same happened with the chandelier in the room. I was a little apprehensive. I went to the fuse box in the kitchen, but I didn't see anything that would indicate something wrong, so already kinda tired, I went to brush my teeth and sleep. When I was at the sink, I heard a loud noise of doors slamming, but I had already locked everything. I went carefully to examine each port, but everything was as normal as I'd left it. A few more days and I was on the edge of the pool watching a wonderful moonlight together with 2 of my friends, and we stayed there chatting and drinking. When I went out to get some ice and my friend said he was going to the bathroom, and my friend continued there on the edge of the pool. When I came back, she was staring up, more precisely at the top floor of the house, and I asked her what she was looking at. She said she had seen a woman open the upstairs balcony door and go out, cross the whole balcony and enter the other end of the house. She said she didn't know I had anyone else at home. I replied that I really didn't. She said she had seen a woman with her hair tied up at the back of her neck like a bun, and she walked across the porch and then went through another door on the other side of the porch. That made me shiver all over. I said I had seen someone like that in the room weeks before, and she crossed herself. That same night, these friends of mine and I were already inside the house when we heard the sound of water in the pool, as if someone was diving into it. But when we ran to the window towards the pool, there was nothing, not even water thrown out of the pool. I got home one day, and after putting on a nightgown to sleep, I was letting my hair down and I went towards the window, uncompromisingly, when suddenly I noticed an orange light that flashed and another red light that also flashed incessantly. That's when I realized and I noticed that it was the car parked downstairs and the hazard warning lights were on by themselves. He knew he hadn't turned on the hazard warning lights, especially inside the farm. What would I use the blinkers for? And even because it was too quiet there, and I would have noticed the little noise it makes after turning off the car. Days passed and I no longer felt so comfortable inside that house. One day, it was thundering and raining heavily, and that day I was having a serious power outage problem, and to make matters worse, it was raining a lot. I decided to get out of bed and check if the lights were back on, and thank God they were already working. So I decided to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, I looked at the front entrance door, which consisted of a huge wooden door, and above the door there was a large, half-moon-shaped pane of glass, divided into 3, above the door. I shivered all over. There was a person, a face pressed against the glass, looking in, but it didn't look entirely human because the eyes seemed to almost pop out of their sockets. They were almost 2 wide white balls staring into the house, making me let out a scream and run away. When I looked again, there was nothing there. The next day, looking more closely, there was no way a person could stay out there, because there was nothing they could stand on or even climb. Even if he managed to get his foot up on the doorknob, he had nowhere to hold his hands or hold on, and besides, he wouldn't be tall enough to reach the glass. The distance between the doorknob and the glass was quite high, so that he could look into the window. Inside, I was sure I saw something. It was a face, but the eyes were immensely large and white, almost popping out of the eyeballs. Horrifying indeed. I was getting more and more scared and anguished every day, but since the weird facts didn't happen every day, it ended up giving me time to recover from the scares and keep going. There was even a day when I went to get a can of preserves from the pantry. It was a small room, and after turning on the light in the room, I was inside looking for the preserves. I felt a great cold, and something made a sound, and when I looked at the door, it slammed violently. I was cold with fear. I leaned against the door and grabbed the handle, but it opened easily. I was already thinking that it would be like the horror movie scenes where the door doesn't open, but it opened normally, which gave me a certain relief. One day, he had arrived from a party and it was already dawn. When I went up the stairs, suddenly I couldn't see anything. Everything went dark, as if I had gone blind. I was bewildered, and when I turned back, my foot slipped on the steps below and I simply rolled down the stairs. I ended up stopping down there and hitting the back of my head on the iron of the side railing. But I didn't lose consciousness. I just stood still without really understanding what had happened. I was seeing normally. At this moment, I heard the sound of doors slamming all over the house, and when I recovered myself, I started to go upstairs, and I was still cleaning myself when I risked a look up and saw a plump woman cross part of the second floor and disappear. Because from where I was, I couldn't see straight. I was terrified. I started to have trouble sleeping and rolled over in bed trying to fall asleep. It was getting to shreds. I was thinking about exactly that when I had already entered the farm with the car and was driving down a small road next to a ravine, already inside the farm to reach the garage when the front tire of the car left the road and I panicked, making a movement sharp with the steering wheel, and I ended up skidding and diving into the ravine. The car fell from a height of about 5 meters, sliding on the mud and grass and coming to a stop at the bottom when it hit a small clay hill at the end of the ravine with all its might. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt and I ended up smashing the window with my head, and as the car was tilted, I went out through the windshield. Incredibly, I suffered only superficial scratches, got a huge bump and a small cut on my head. I took off the heels I was wearing and used a less steep part to reach the road, walked the rest of the way and then climbed some steps to reach the side of the house. I took a shower because it was muddy and all dirty with earth. While I was putting alcohol on the scratches, I clearly heard the sound of footsteps upstairs, almost running, and the noise of a voice. After a while, the sound of something diving into the pool. I slept on the couch in the living room. I woke up. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. I was feeling ulcer and my whole body in tatters. I made a very strong coffee and decided to change clothes and get out of there to clear my head. When I got to the room, I saw my quilt all torn, as if claws had ripped it all. I was in disbelief. My dressing table also had a broken perfume bottle and the other one was smashed across the room as if it had been hurled at the wall with all its force. It had the mark of the perfume spilled and dripped on the wall. I tried to clean up that mess and got out of there, called the insurance tow truck and went to a friend's house, who ended up advising me to go to the hospital to see if nothing had broken. Then I decided to take advantage and visit my cleaning lady and find out why she didn't. She showed up more at my house because she was intrigued and thinking that she could advance me something or discover something. She lived a few kilometers away. I took a taxi nearby and headed there. She told me she was working for other employers and didn't have time to see me anymore, so I told her that was fine, but if I could ask her a few questions, and asked her if she had noticed anything odd about the house. She, without looking at me, said that the last time she was at the farm, she was winding up the garden water hose when she started to hear a noise, like someone sharpening a knife in the kitchen, and when she stuck her face out the window, she saw a woman sharpening a knife and laughing softly, frantically, eyes fixed on the knife. She went to the small room and collected her things and left as quickly as possible. I thought my life was in danger. It never appeared again. I stood there motionless, listening to her tell me all that. Back at the house, I continued to hear noise as if someone had been diving in the pool, and I ran out to the bedroom window to see, and there was nothing. I heard downstairs, one day, the noise of laughter, and when I went down, It seemed that nothing had happened. I could only hear the crickets outside. One day, I woke up with something humming in my ear. I sat watching. I ended up going back to sleep, because sometimes I ended up taking a tranquilizer, since a friend of mine, who was a doctor, prescribed me a very mild tranquilizer, and it ended up having a strong effect, because I wasn't used to it. One day, my aunt was with me on a weekend. When we were getting ready to sleep, we went upstairs, and when we passed the second bedroom, we both automatically looked inside and saw someone sleeping on the bed, and she said, "But what is that?" I immediately tried to run to turn on the other light in the hallway so we could see better, and she ran with me so she wouldn't be alone. When we went back to take a better look, there was absolutely nothing. We just stood in the hall looking inside. So I walked over and put my hand on the switch. I turned on the light. The room was normal, but both she and I saw someone lying there. It looked like he was in some sort of dark or black suit, and I distinctly remember that he was wearing shoes, lying on top of the bed. This I even remember quite clearly. There was a day when I woke up terrified and soaked with so much sweat, but I didn't know what had happened. In fact, it was a nightmare, and I ended up falling out of bed and tried to turn on the lamp. It flickered and burned out. I got up and turned on the one in the bedroom, which also gave a very strong flash and went out, and I couldn't make it turn on anymore. I had to turn on one of the hall lights for any light to work. I tried to take another shower. I was so sweaty. Sometimes I got so tired of some startle that I was always alert, and that tired me even more. I took a bubble bath in the bathtub to relax a little, and I stayed there for a long time with my eyes closed and relaxing, and I left the bathroom door open, since I was the only one who lived in the house, so there was no problem at all. I was in the bathtub, and suddenly I felt a strong cold sensation that continued to increase, and soon after, the impression of someone running down the boarded corridor. Running, making a great noise, as if someone or something was running and had fallen almost in front of the bathroom door, except that I couldn't see anything because I was in the bathtub, and from the position I was in, I had a partial view of the hallway. I pulled the towel over my breasts and curled up. I was silent, in that horrible expectation, and I stayed like that for some time, and suddenly I heard something shuffling very close to the bathroom door, but it never got as far as in front of the bathroom door. It took a break and crawled again. It was maddening. I got out of the bathtub when the water had already cooled down. My jaw was beating from the cold. I decided to throw a party to lighten the mood and invited several family members and some friends. I said they could call whoever they wanted, as long as they let me know so I knew how many things were there. I let people circulate freely in the rooms. I just tried to lock my room, or also keep valuable things, since there were many strange people at the party. Everything was going well, with music, food, drink, but without excesses. When I went to the door of the house to say goodbye to a guest, I was called to go to the pool and asked to look up. There were two hysterical guests clinging to the railing of the huge balcony. Upstairs, they were screaming and they looked really terrified. The other guests went to help them. One of them sprained her foot as she decided to go down the porch and jump on the lawn. No one could understand what was going on. After a few minutes for them to calm down, and all of us together there, trying to find out what had happened, I particularly already imagined some hypothesis. They said a little out of control that they were there on the balcony and decided to go down, so when they returned through the corridor, they heard a strong footsteps towards them and something screaming in their ear, without anyone else there, and it kept screaming in their ear even though they had come running back. That was enough for both of them to make the inverse path and run back along the rest of the corridor, enter the balcony again, go to the end of the balcony and remain huddled, asking for help from the other guests downstairs. As I didn't want to be on the basis of tranquilizers constantly, I ended up moving to a small house close to a cousin of mine, and that was a few years ago, and I don't remember that period with much enthusiasm, since it was quite stressful. I heard there was a murder in the house after I moved out.